Just think about color for a second. It's absolutely everywhere, isn't it? That amazing blue sky, the green of grass, a bright red apple. It shapes how we see everything.
It really does. It guides us, triggers feelings, defines our world in so many ways.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today, the science behind it all. How does color actually work?
Yeah, we're going beyond just, appreciating nice colors. We'll look at the light itself, how our eyes pick it up, how our brain makes sense of it.
We'll even touch on color in tech and nature.
Hi.
Maybe even question if color is real in the way we think it is.
Exactly. The mission today is really to unpack the science of color, make it understandable, and maybe reveal some surprising things along the way.
Okay, let's jump right in. Fundamentally, what is color? How do scientists define it?
Well, at its core, color is how we perceive the different qualities of light that objects either reflect towards us or emit themselves.
Qualities
Like hue, that's your basic color name, red, green, blue. Then there's lightness, how bright or dark it seems, and saturation, which is about the intensity, like a really vivid red versus a pale pink.
Okay, hue, lightness, saturation, got it.
And what's fascinating is that color science isn't just one thing. It pulls from physics for the light part, obviously physiology for the eye and brain, and psychology for our actual experience of it. Plus, it's super important in loads of industries like design, printing, displays.
So it's really interdisciplinary. And you mentioned something before we started, this idea that light itself isn't actually colors. That sounds counterintuitive.
It really does, but it's a crucial point. Physically, light is electromagnetic waves. Different waves have different lengths, different frequencies.
Right.
But the color part, that happens in us. It's our visual system's response.
Mm-hmm.
Our brain basically translates those different wavelengths into the experience we call color. It's a mental interpretation.
Wow, okay, so our brain is creating the color, not the light wave itself.
Let's dig into that light then, the physics side. What is light? So light's got this cool dual nature. Sometimes it acts like a wave, an electromagnetic wave, specifically. Think ripples on a pond, but with electric and magnetic fields oscillating.
Okay.
And sometimes it acts like a particle, a tiny packet of energy called a photon.
Wave and particle, both.
Both. And these waves exist across a huge range, the electromagnetic spectrum, radio waves, microwaves, X-rays. Visible light, the stuff we see, is just this tiny, tiny little slice of that whole spectrum.
It's amazing that tiny slice gives us everything from violet to red. How do those colors relate to the waves?
It's all about the wavelength, the distance between the peaks of the wave. Shorter wavelengths around, say, 380 to 450 nanometers. And a nanometer is incredibly small, a billionth of a meter.
Tiny.
Yeah, those short ones we perceive as violet and blue. As the wavelength gets longer, we move through green, then yellow, orange, and finally red, which has the longest visible wavelengths, up to about 715 nanometers.
So shorter waves are blue-violet, longer waves are read-orange, simple enough. And the photons, the particles, how do they fit?
Well, the energy of a photon is linked to the frequency of the wave. And frequency is inversely related to wavelength. Shorter wavelengths means higher frequency and vice versa.
Okay.
So those short wavelength violet photons, they have higher energy. The long wavelength red photons have lower energy. Energy and wavelength are directly linked.
Right. Higher frequency, shorter wave, more energy. Lower frequency, longer wave, less energy. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this light with different wavelengths and energies. How does that create the color of, say, this red mug on the table?
That comes down to how light interacts with the mug's material. When light hits an object, a few things can happen. Absorption, reflection, sometimes refraction if it passes through, or transmission.
Absorption and reflection seem key for opaque things like a mug.
Exactly. The color we see on an opaque object is mostly about reflection. The pigments in the ceramic of your mug are absorbing most of the wavelengths hitting it, but they're reflecting the red wavelengths. Those red wavelengths bounce off and hit your eye.
So the mug isn't making red light, it's just rejecting it while eating the other colors.
That's a great way to put it. It selectively absorbs the blues, greens, yellows, etc., and reflects the red. A white object, on the other hand, reflects pretty much all visible wavelengths.
And black absorbs most of them.
Right. Black absorbs almost all wavelengths, which is why we often think of it as the absence of color, or at least the absence of reflected light.
Okay, that makes sense macroscopically. But what's happening inside the material at the atomic level that causes this selective absorption? Why does the mug absorb blue but reflect red?
Now we get into quantum mechanics. It's about the electrons within the atoms of the pigment material. These electrons can only exist at specific energy levels, like steps on a ladder. They can't be in between steps.
Quantized energy levels. Okay.
Exactly. Now, for an electron to absorb a photon of light, That photon's energy has to exactly match the energy difference between the electron's current level and a higher empty level.
Like needing the exact fare to get on the bus.
Precisely. If the photon has just the right amount of energy, the electron absorbs it and jumps up to that higher energy level. It gets excited.
And if the photon's energy doesn't match?
If it doesn't match any possible energy jump for the electrons in that material, the photon isn't absorbed. It's usually reflected, or, if the material is transparent, transmitted through.
So the specific latter steps, the energy levels available in the atoms, determine which photons get absorbed.
Absolutely. The unique atomic and molecular structure of a material defines its unique set of allowed electron energy levels. That's why different materials absorb different wavelengths. This selective absorption is the key. The wavelengths that don't get absorbed are the ones that reach our eyes, defining the color we perceive.
That's incredible. The color is literally baked into the atomic structure. Okay, so the light reflects off, carrying that color information in its wavelengths. It enters our eye. What happens next? What's the biology?
Right, the biological part is just as fascinating. Light enters through the cornea, gets focused by the lens, and hits the retina at the back of the eye.
The retina, that's the light-sensitive part.
Yes, it's lined with millions of photoreceptor cells. Two main types, rods and cones.
I remember those from biology class. Rods for dim light, cones for color.
You got it. Rods are super sensitive, great for seeing in low light, but they don't distinguish colors. That's why things look grayish at night. Cones need brighter light to work, and they are responsible for our color vision.
And where are the cones mostly found?
They're packed most densely in the center of the retina, in an area called the macula, especially the fovea, right in the middle. That's why our central vision is sharpest and best for color detail.
And we have different types of cones, right, for different colors.
We typically have three types, often called S, M, and L cones. They're most sensitive to short blue, medium green, and long red wavelengths of light, respectively. Though, importantly, their sensitivities overlap quite a bit.
Overlap. So it's not like one cone just sees red.
No, it's about the pattern of response across all three types. Your brain looks at how strongly the S cones are firing versus the M cones versus the L cones. The relative stimulation tells the brain what color it's seeing. Seeing yellow, for instance, involves strong stimulation of both M green and L red cones, with little from the S blue cones.
So it's a comparison game. Trichromatic vision, that's the term.
That's the one, based on those three cone types. Rods, meanwhile, just have one type of photopigment, rhodopsin. Great for detecting light intensity, but no color info. That's scotopic vision, night vision.
Okay. Cones detect the light, figure out the rough wavelength balance. Then what? How does that signal get to the brain?
The cones and rods convert the light energy into electrical signals. These signals are then processed by other neurons in the retina and bundled together into the optic nerve, which travels from the back of each eye into the brain.
And where in the brain does it end up?
The main destination is the visual cortex, located in the occipital lobe, right at the back of your head.
So if you bump the back of your head, you might see stars.
Exactly, that's the visual processing center being stimulated. In the visual cortex, the brain does a huge amount of complex processing on those incoming signals to construct our conscious perception of color, its hue, its saturation, its brightness, integrating it with shape, motion, context.
It's not just a simple relay. The brain is actively building the image.
Massively active. And there's another layer too, the opponent process theory.
Opponent process, what's that?
It suggests that after the initial cone signals, color information is processed in opposing pairs. Red versus green, blue versus yellow, and also black versus white or light versus dark. Certain nerve cells get excited by, say, red light and inhibited by green light, or vice versa.
Is that why we can't really imagine a reddish green or a bluish yellow?
That's one of the key things it explains. It also helps account for phenomena like after images stare at a red square, then look at a white wall, and you see a faint green square. That's the green part of the opponent system rebounding after being inhibited.
Wow. So cones detect, then opponent cells process as layers of interpretation. Which brings up that big question again. If my cones are slightly different from yours, or my opponent cells work slightly differently, is my red the same as your red? Is color objective or subjective?
The million-dollar question. Philosophers and scientists still debate this. You've got objectivism, the idea that color is a real property of the object, maybe tied to its surface spectral reflectance existing whether we see it or not.
Like its mass or shape.
Sort of. Then there's subjectivism, the view that color only exists in our minds as a purely internal experience. It's generated by the brain, full stop.
Yeah, my red is just my red.
Exactly. And then there's relationalism, kind of a middle ground, saying color emerges from the relationship between the object, the light hitting it, and the observer's visual system. It takes all three.
Relationalism seems intuitive given everything we've discussed. What does the science suggest? Things like color blindness must point towards subjectivity, right?
They certainly do. The fact that color vision deficiency exists where people lack or have malfunctioning cone types shows that the biological hardware matters immensely. Even among people with normal vision, there are subtle variations in cone ratios and neural processing, so it's highly unlikely that my precise sensation of red is identical to yours.
So the wavelength hitting our eyes might be objectively the same.
Yes, the wavelength is measurable physics, but the perceived color, the quale, the actual experience, that's a brain interpretation. And that interpretation can be influenced by lots of things: mood, expectation, memory, even maybe culture.
Culture, how so?
Well, how we divide up the spectrum and name colors isn't universal. Some languages have fewer basic color terms than English, or group colors differently. Does that change how they perceive color? It's debated, but language certainly shapes how we categorize and think about it.
Our brain does things like color constancy too, right? Seeing a banana is yellow, even in weird lighting.
Exactly. The brain actively adjusts our perception based on the assumed lighting conditions. It's trying to figure out the object's true color, not just the raw wavelength data hitting the eye at that moment. It's constantly interpreting and constructing.
So the verdict is kind of both. There's an objective physical basis in light waves, but the experience is a subjective, brain-constructed reality shaped by biology, context, and maybe even culture.
That seems to be the most balanced view, yes, a complex interplay.
Okay, given this complexity and subjectivity, how do we manage to get things like computer screens and printers to show roughly the same colors? We must have systems for defining color, right?
We absolutely do. We use color models. The most common one for display screens, phones, TVs is the additive RGB model.
Red, green, blue.
Right. Screens are made of tiny pixels, each capable of emitting red, green, and blue light at different intensities. By adding these lights together in different proportions, you can create millions of different colors. Mix all three at full blast, you get white. Turn them all off, you get black.
Adding light makes white, okay? But printing uses different colors, doesn't it? CMYK.
It does, because printing works on a subtractive principle. You start with white paper, which reflects all colors. The inks, cyan, magenta, and yellow act like filters. They subtract or absorb certain wavelengths from the white light reflecting off the paper.
So cyanate absorbs red light, magenta absorbs green, yellow absorbs blue, letting the other colors reflect.
Precisely. When you mix C, M, and Y inks, they subtract more and more light, ideally producing black. In practice, mixing them gives more of a muddy brown, so printers add a separate black ink, that's the K in CMYK, for deep blacks and better contrast.
Additive for light, screens, subtractive for pigment. Makes sense. Are there other important models? I sometimes see HSL or LAB in software.
Yes, HSL, hue, saturation, lightness, and HSV, hue, saturation, value, are more intuitive ways to think about color, closer to how we perceive it. Hue is the color itself, saturation is the intensity, and lightness value is the brightness. They're often used in color pickers. And lab, specifically Scilab, is really important in professional fields. It's designed to be perceptually uniform, meaning the numerical distance between two colors in lab space roughly corresponds to how different they look to humans. It's also device independent, a sort of universal reference.
And Pantone. That's for matching specific ink colors, isn't it?
Exactly. Pantone is a standardized system mainly for print and manufacturing, providing specific numbered ink formulas to ensure consistent color reproduction across different jobs and locations, like getting the exact Coca-Cola red.
Right, critical for branding. Okay, we've touched on this, but let's really nail it down. Back to the atoms and molecules. Why does a specific pigment absorb blue and green but reflect red? You mentioned energy levels.
Yes, it all comes back to those quantized electron energy levels, governed by quantum mechanics. Remember, electrons can only absorb photons if the photon's energy exactly matches the gap between the electron's current level and a higher available level.
The exact bus fare.
The exact bus fare. If the photon's energy matches, it's absorbed, the electron jumps up. If it doesn't match any allowed jump in that specific molecule, the photon is typically reflected or transmitted.
And every molecule has its own unique set of allowed jumps, its own bus routes.
Perfectly put. The specific structure of the molecule determines its unique energy level configuration. This unique configuration dictates which specific photon energies, and therefore which wavelength or colors of light, it can absorb.
That's selective absorption again.
That's selective absorption. So a red pigment molecule has energy level gaps that correspond to the energies of blue and green photons. It readily absorbs those. But it doesn't have gaps matching the energy of red photons, so those tend to get reflected. The reflected red light is what we see.
So the color arises from the light that's left over after absorption. But you mentioned another way things get color. Structural color, like butterfly wings.
Oh, yes. Structural color is completely different. It doesn't rely on pigments absorbing light. Instead, it comes from the microscopic physical structure of the surface itself.
How does that work?
Think of incredibly tiny, precisely arranged structures, layers, ridges, spheres on the scale of the wavelengths of light. These structures cause light waves to interfere with each other. Some waves cancel out, others reinforce each other, depending on the wavelength and the viewing angle.
Interference. Like noise-canceling headphones, but for light waves.
Kind of, yes. Constructive and destructive interference. This causes certain wavelengths to be reflected very strongly at specific angles. Because it depends on the angle, structural colors often appear iridescent. They shift and shimmer as you change your viewpoint. Think peacock feathers, soap bubbles, the back of a CD.
So pigment color is usually consistent. Structural color often shifts.
Got it. This is amazing. In nature, color is clearly doing important jobs.
Oh, absolutely vital. We mentioned camouflage, blending in to hide from predators or sneak up on prey. That's huge.
Yeah.
Then there's signaling. Bright colors in mating displays, birds, fish often signal health and good genes to potential mates.
Showing off. Definitely. And the opposite warning coloration, aposematism, bright contrasting patterns on things like poison dart frogs or coral snakes scream, "Don't eat me, I'm dangerous." Predators learn to avoid those signals.
Smart. And flowers use color too, right?
Massively. Flowers use specific colors, sometimes even UV patterns we can't see, to attract the right pollinators. Bees, for example, see UV, blue, and green really well, but not red. So flowers pollinated by bees often use those colors.
Fascinating. So animals don't all see color the way we do.
Not at all. It's incredibly diverse, tailored to their ecological niche. We mentioned bees seeing UV, but not red. Many birds are tetrachromats. They have 4 types of cones, adding UV sensitivity to our red, green, and blue. They probably see a world far richer in color than we can imagine.
4 cones. Wow. Any of the weird ones?
The mantis shrimp is the champion. They might have 12 to 16 different photoreceptor types, plus they can see polarized light in ways we can't even fathom. Their visual system is ridiculously complex.
16 types. Mind-blowing. And what about more common animals, like dogs or cats?
They're dichromats. They only have 2 types of cones, sensitive roughly to blue and yellowish green light. They basically see the world in shades of blue and yellow and can't distinguish reds and greens well. Similar to human red-green color blindness.
Ah, so that's why red toys might not be as exciting for them.
Uh-huh.
And human color blindness itself, that's usually genetic.
Often, yes. Red-green color blindness is the most common, linked to genes on the X chromosome, which is why it affects males more often. It involves issues with the M green or L red cones. There are different types like protanopia and deuteranopia. Less common is tritanopia, affecting blue cones, and very rare is monochromacy, seeing only in grayscale.
It really highlights how dependent our color world is on those 3 specific cone types working correctly. Okay, shifting gears slightly, we know color affects animal behavior, but what about us? The psychology of color. Does seeing red really make us more aggressive or blue calmer?
There's a lot of research and popular belief around that. Blue is often associated with calm, red with excitement or alertness, green with nature and peace. And there's some evidence for these effects, but it's complex and heavily influenced by personal experience and, crucially, culture.
Culture again?
Definitely. While some basic physiological responses might exist, red light can slightly increase heart rate. Perhaps the deeper meanings are very culturally learned. Think about white, purity in weddings in the West, mourning in parts of Asia. Same color, totally different symbolism.
So context is key. It's not a simple color emotion code.
Not at all. Our own preferences matter too. We tend to associate colors we like with positive things. And there are even effects like warm colors, reds, yellows, potentially making time seem to pass faster, or a room feel warmer than cool colors, blues, greens. It's subtle but measurable.
And what about really unusual connections like synesthesia? Seeing colors with sounds.
Synesthesia is fascinating. Chromesthesia, hearing, sounds, and seeing colors, is one type. Grapheme color synesthesia, where letters or numbers evoke specific colors, is another common one. It really shows how interconnected sensory processing can be in the brain and how individual these experiences are. Perception isn't one size fits all.
Definitely not. Okay, let's talk tech again. How do our cameras actually capture color? You mentioned RGB filters earlier.
Right, most digital camera sensors use a Bayer filter. It's a mosaic pattern, typically one red, one blue, and two green filters arranged over neighboring pixels.
Why more green?
Because human eyes are most sensitive to green light, so capturing more green information helps produce an image that looks more natural to us after processing. Each pixel initially only captures data for one color,
So how do you get a full color image?
through a process called demosaicing or debayering. The camera's software looks at the color value recorded by a pixel and the values of its neighbors, and intelligently interpolates the missing two color values for that pixel. It's essentially making a highly educated guess to fill in the blanks.
Clever. Are there other ways cameras do it?
There are some, like the Foveon X3 sensor. It uses silicon's property of absorbing different wavelengths at different depths. It has 3 layers of pixels stacked vertically, so it captures red, green, and blue information at every single pixel location, theoretically giving truer color without interpolation.
More accurate, potentially.
Mhm.
And getting that color right across devices, calibration is key, right? Using those color spaces like sRGB.
Absolutely crucial, especially for professional work. A color space like sRGB defines a specific range or gamut of colors. Adobe RGB has a wider gamut, often used in photography. DCI-P3 is common in digital cinema. Calibration ensures your monitor, for instance, is displaying those colors as accurately as possible according to the chosen standard. Otherwise, what you see isn't what someone else sees or what gets printed.
And screen technology matters too. LCD versus OLED.
Big time. Traditional LCDs use a backlight shining through liquid crystals and color filters. OLED, organic light-emitting diode displays, are different. Each pixel generates its own light. This means they can achieve true black by simply turning pixels off, and generally offer better contrast and more vibrant colors. QD-OLED is a newer tech combining quantum dots with OLED for even better brightness and color range.
Technology keeps improving. Is AI getting involved in color tech too?
Increasingly so. AI, particularly machine learning, is great at color recognition. Think quality control on assembly lines spotting defective colors, or sorting materials for recycling based on color. Agriculture uses it to assess crop ripeness. Even medical imaging uses AI to analyze subtle color variations that might indicate disease.
Maybe helping people with color blindness.
Yes, that's a really promising area. Augmented reality apps that can analyze the world through a phone camera and remap problematic colors in real time to make them more distinguishable for someone with color vision deficiency. AI is powering those kinds of assistive tools.
That's fantastic. Looking further out, what's on the horizon for color science? What are the next big things?
Well, metamaterials are super exciting. These are artificially engineered materials with structures designed to manipulate light in ways natural materials can't. Think potential for things like super-resolution lenses, maybe even optical cloaking bending light around an object.
Invisibility cloaks.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It's theoretically possible based on the physics, though practical challenges are huge. But manipulating light at that fundamental level is a key research area. Also, augmented vision systems that could enhance normal human color perception, perhaps letting us see into the near-infrared or UV, or just providing richer color experiences.
Expanding our senses through tech.
Exactly. And hyperspectral imaging is becoming more powerful. Instead of just red, green, blue, it captures hundreds of thousands of narrow spectral bands across a wide range. This gives incredibly detailed information about what something is made of, far beyond what our eyes can see. Useful in everything from astronomy and remote sensing to food safety and art analysis.
Seeing the unseen chemical signatures. Wow. Okay, as we wrap up, let's circle back to that philosophical point. After all this, is color real? Or just in our heads?
It still feels like the answer is nuanced, doesn't it? The physical reality is wavelengths of light interacting with matter based on quantum rules. That's objective. But the experience of color, the qualia of redness or blueness, that seems inextricably tied to our specific biological and neurological makeup. It's a brain construct, an interpretation of that physical reality.
So, real physics, interpreted experience.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, if we could see the whole electromagnetic spectrum, radio waves, gamma rays, how radically different would our perception of the universe be?
Utterly transformed. We're perceiving such a tiny fraction of the information bombarding us constantly. It's humbling, really.
Or thinking about someone blind from birth,
Yeah.
how do you explain red to them? Can they grasp it through analogy, through heat, through sound, maybe?
It's incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to truly convey a sensory experience across modalities. It highlights how much our understanding is tied to the specific senses we possess. Color is fundamentally a visual phenomenon for us.
It really is profound when you stop and think about something so seemingly simple. We've covered a lot today, the physics of light waves and
It's
photons,
the incredible biology of our eyes and brain, the cones, the opponent processes.
how different animals see the world, the psychology and culture of color, the technology we use to capture and display it.
And even peeked at future possibilities with metamaterials and enhanced vision. It's a huge field.
It truly shows how interconnected science is and how much complexity underlies our everyday experience. From a simple light wave to the vibrant world we see, it's quite a journey.
It really is. And our understanding is still evolving. Who knows what we'll discover next about how we perceive and interact with color.
So maybe the final thought for everyone listening is just next time you look around, really notice the colors. Think about the physics, the biology, the interpretation happening constantly inside your own head to create that reality. It's pretty amazing. Thanks for taking this deep dive into the science of color with us today.